My name is Rebecca Anderson, and I'm 73 years old. I never thought my own flesh and blood would betray me like this. My son Thomas, who I raised alone after his father died, put me in a nursing home without even asking me. He and his wife had their eyes on my house and car all along. I trusted him completely. But what they never expected was that I still had fight left in me, and I had a plan that would turn their scheme upside down. Before I get into my story, I would love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I lived in a beautiful two-story colonial house in a peaceful suburb of Sacramento, California. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knows each other with tree-lined streets and well-kept gardens. James and I bought this house 45 years ago just after Thomas was born. We scraped together every penny for the down payment, believing this would be our forever home where we would grow old together. My late husband James was a dedicated high school math teacher. He passed away from a heart attack 15 years ago, leaving me to navigate life alone. James was always so meticulous about our finances. "Rebecca," he would say, "we need to make sure you're taken care of if anything happens to me." And he did just that, leaving me financially secure with our mortgage paid off, a modest pension, and some savings. After teaching fourth grade for 32 years, I retired but kept myself busy. My garden was my pride and joy, with roses that won ribbons at the county fair, and a vegetable patch that provided fresh produce from spring to fall. The neighbors would often stop by to admire my dahlias, or pick up some fresh tomatoes and zucchini that I couldn't possibly eat all by myself. My 2010 silver Toyota Camry was my lifeline to independence. Nothing fancy, but reliable and perfect for my needs. I drove myself to my book club meetings every Thursday, volunteered at the community library twice a week, and never missed my grandchildren's school performances, at least when Thomas and Stephanie would tell me about them. I maintained an active social life with a circle of friends, most of whom I'd known for decades. We would meet for coffee at Rosie's Diner every Monday morning, sharing stories about our grandchildren, and planning our next day trip to the coast or the local winery. My friend Marion and I took a water aerobics class at the YMCA 3 times a week. "Gotta keep these old bones moving," I would joke. Yes, I had some health issues. What person my age doesn't? Arthritis in my knees made stairs a bit challenging on rainy days. My vision wasn't what it used to be, especially for night driving. I had high blood pressure that was well controlled with medication. But none of these problems affected my ability to live independently. I took great pride in managing my own affairs. I paid my bills on time, kept my house clean and organized, and prepared nutritious meals for myself. I even embraced technology contrary to what many people assume about seniors. I had a smartphone that I used to video chat with my sister in Florida, and a laptop where I managed my email and even did some online banking. "Mom, you're more tech-savvy than half my friends," Thomas would say, seemingly impressed by my adaptability. Little did I know that this comment masked his surprise that I was still so independent, which didn't fit into his plans for my future and my assets. I truly believed I had created a beautiful life for myself as a widow. My home was my sanctuary, filled with memories of the life James and I built together. Every corner held something precious. The mark on the kitchen door frame, where we measured Thomas's height as he grew, the slight dent in the living room wall from when Thomas threw a baseball indoors, despite our rules, the garden bench where James and I would sit in the evenings watching the sunset. I had no desire to leave this place that held my heart. And I had no idea that the people I trusted most were plotting to take it all away from me. My son Thomas is 47 years old, married to Stephanie for almost 20 years now. They live in a McMansion in an upscale neighborhood about 40 minutes from my home. Their house is too big for just the 4 of them, with their 2 children, Amanda, who's 17, and Jason, who's 14. It's all granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and furniture that looks like nobody ever sits on it. Thomas works as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. He makes good money, but Stephanie has expensive tastes. She drives a luxury SUV that gets replaced every 2 years. Their vacations are always to exclusive resorts. The children attend private school and have every gadget and designer clothing item their hearts desire. "We work hard for what we have," Stephanie would say whenever I commented on a new expensive purchase. The implication was always clear. They deserved these luxuries because they earned them. The unspoken comparison to my more modest lifestyle hung in the air. I raised Thomas alone after James died when Thomas was just 13. Those teenage years were tough, but we got through them together. I worked extra tutoring jobs after school to put money aside for his college fund. I drove him to countless baseball practices and stayed up late helping with science projects. I attended every parent-teacher conference and cheered at every game. When he got accepted to UC Berkeley, I couldn't have been prouder. "Your father would be so proud of you," I told him, tears in my eyes. Thomas graduated with a business degree and immediately landed a good job. He met Stephanie at a company party a year later, and their whirlwind romance led to marriage within 6 months. I had concerns about Stephanie from the beginning. She was beautiful and charming when she wanted to be, but there was a coldness beneath the surface. She came from money and had expectations about maintaining a certain lifestyle. When they were first married and struggling to afford their first home, I loaned them $30,000 for a down payment. Thomas promised to pay me back, but whenever I gently brought it up over the years, there was always some reason why they couldn't start repayments yet. "Mom, we've got Amanda's braces this year," or "the property taxes just hit us hard," or "we had to replace the air conditioning unit." There was always something. Eventually I stopped asking, considering it my gift to them, though a thank you would have been nice. As the years passed, Thomas and Stephanie's visits became less frequent, usually around holidays or when they needed a babysitter. They rarely invited me to their home, always citing how busy they were with the children's activities. When I did visit, Stephanie would make comments about my clothes or hair that seemed like compliments, but left me feeling inadequate. The grandchildren grew more distant as they entered their teenage years. Amanda was always texting on her phone during visits, barely looking up to acknowledge me. Jason was a bit warmer, but clearly took social cues from his parents about how to treat Grandma. About 2 years ago, I noticed a change in Thomas's behavior. He started visiting more frequently, sometimes without Stephanie and the kids. He began asking questions about my finances, my will, and my health. "Just want to make sure everything's in order, Mom," he would say when I questioned these inquiries. "Dad always said I should look out for you." He brought up the topic of downsizing, suggesting I might be happier in a smaller place with less maintenance. Each time I firmly told him I was happy in my home and capable of taking care of it. He would drop the subject, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Then came the comments about my memory. "Mom, you already told me that story yesterday," he would say, even when I was certain I hadn't. Or, "Mom, didn't you remember we were coming today? I texted you about it." I would doubt myself, checking my phone to find no such message. I began noticing whispered conversations between Thomas and Stephanie when they thought I wasn't listening. Once I overheard Stephanie say, "The house must be worth at least $600,000 now with the market the way it is." Thomas shushed her when he saw me approaching. I dismissed my concerns, telling myself I was being paranoid. This was my son, my Thomas, who I had raised to be honest and caring. Surely he wouldn't be planning something behind my back. I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. It all began with a minor incident. I missed a step coming down from the back porch and twisted my ankle. Nothing serious, just a mild sprain that had me limping for a few days. I didn't even think it was worth mentioning to Thomas, but my neighbor Barbara must have called him because he showed up at my door the next day, concern etched on his face. "Mom, Barbara told me you fell. Why didn't you call me?" His voice was strained with what I interpreted as worry. "It's just a twisted ankle, Thomas. Nothing to worry about." I assured him, touched by his concern. He insisted on coming inside, looking around my house with critical eyes. "These throw rugs are dangerous, Mom. And those stairs without a second handrail. I'm worried about you living here alone." Before I knew it, he was suggesting a doctor's appointment, just to be safe. I agreed, thinking it would reassure him that I was fine. Thomas insisted on scheduling it himself and driving me there. On the day of the appointment, I was surprised when Thomas directed me to a building I wasn't familiar with. Dr. Lewis moved to this new medical center, he explained smoothly. The office didn't look like a typical doctor's office. It was more institutional with a sign that read, Golden Sunset Senior Assessments. A woman in a navy blue blazer introduced herself as Dr. Winters. She wasn't my regular physician, but Thomas explained she was a specialist in senior care. The questions she asked seemed strange, not focused on my ankle at all, but on my memory, my ability to perform daily tasks, and my mental state. Can you tell me today's date? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? Do you ever feel confused about taking your medications? I answered everything clearly and correctly, though I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Thomas sat in the corner, nodding encouragingly occasionally, whispering to the doctor when she stepped closer to him. After the examination, Dr. Winters asked Thomas to join her in the hallway. I could hear murmurs, but couldn't make out what they were saying. When they returned, Thomas had a folder in his hands. Dr. Winters thinks it might be good for you to consider some assisted living options, Mom. Just as a precaution. Nothing immediate. I felt like I'd been ambushed. Assisted living for a twisted ankle, Thomas, that's ridiculous. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Mom, it's not just the ankle, Thomas said, his voice taking on that patient tone people use with children. I've noticed you've been forgetting things. The stove was left on last time I visited. This was completely untrue. I was meticulous about kitchen safety. Dr. Winters interjected. Mrs. Anderson, at your age, it's better to be proactive about these decisions rather than waiting for a crisis. As we left, I noticed Thomas had a stack of brochures and some partially completed paperwork. When I asked to see them, he quickly tucked them into his jacket. Just some information, Mom. We can look at it later. Back at home, I confronted Thomas. I'm not moving to any assisted living facility. My home is here and I'm staying. My voice was firm, and I looked him directly in the eyes. He backpedaled quickly. Of course, Mom. We're just exploring options, that's all. Planning ahead. You know how Dad always liked to have a plan. The invocation of his father made me pause. James had indeed been a planner, always prepared for every contingency. But this felt different. This felt underhanded. After Thomas left, I found a brochure he had accidentally left behind. It wasn't for an assisted living facility. It was for a nursing home called Pine Meadows Care Center. The brochure emphasized their memory care unit and 24-hour supervision for residents who can no longer live independently. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't about my safety or well-being. This was about getting me out of my house. But why? The question haunted me as I tried to sleep that night. I called my regular doctor the next day and scheduled an appointment. Dr. Garcia had been my physician for over a decade. He gave me a thorough checkup and found nothing concerning. Rebecca, you're in excellent health for your age, he assured me. Your cognitive function is normal, your reflexes are good, and that ankle is healing nicely. Keep doing what you're doing. Staying active and engaged is the best medicine. When I told him about the assessment with Dr. Winters, his brow furrowed. I've heard of these senior assessment centers. Some of them do good work, but others have been known to exaggerate conditions to fill beds in affiliated care facilities. They get kickbacks. I left his office feeling vindicated but deeply troubled. My own son had tried to have me declared incompetent. I thought the matter was settled and that Thomas had abandoned his plan. I was wrong. This was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Thomas started showing up at my house unannounced, often with empty boxes. Thought I'd help you organize some of these old things, Mom, he'd say cheerfully. Your closets are getting cluttered. I'd find him in my bedroom sorting through my jewelry box or in the attic among James's old belongings that I couldn't bear to part with. Stephanie began accompanying him more frequently, carrying a notebook and taking photos of my furniture and artwork. Just getting ideas for our redecorating, she explained with a thin smile when I caught her photographing the antique secretary desk that had belonged to my grandmother. One afternoon, Thomas approached me with a stack of papers. Mom, I've been thinking about your finances. It must be hard to keep track of all these bills and accounts at your age. Why don't you add me to your account so I can help manage things, just as a backup?" The suggestion seemed reasonable on the surface. After all, many of my friends had set up their adult children as co-signers on accounts for emergencies. Still hesitant, but wanting to show I trusted my son, I agreed to add him to one of my smaller checking accounts, the one I used for household expenses. "This way, if anything happens to me, you can make sure my bills get paid," I told him. I deliberately didn't give him access to my main savings account or investment portfolio. A week later, I noticed withdrawals from the joint account that I hadn't made. $300 here, $500 there. When I questioned Thomas, he had a ready explanation. "Just moving some money around to better interest-bearing accounts, Mom. Trust me, I'm making your money work harder for you." I never saw statements from these supposed accounts. The red flags were mounting, but I still couldn't bring myself to believe Thomas was deliberately deceiving me. He was my son, my only child. There had to be a misunderstanding. Then came a day when Thomas and Stephanie thought I was napping in my bedroom. I had actually gone to the garden to clip some flowers, but came back in through the side door quietly. I overheard them in the kitchen. "The realtor says we could list it for $650 and probably get multiple offers within a week in this market," Stephanie was saying excitedly. "We need to get her out first," Thomas replied in a hushed tone. "The nursing home requires a 30-day notice before admission. I've already put down the deposit to hold her spot." "What about her car? Are we selling it too?" Stephanie asked. "Of course, she won't need it there. No residents are allowed to have cars. We can probably get 15 for it even though it's older." I stood frozen in the hallway, my cut roses clutched in my trembling hand. There was no misunderstanding possible now. They were planning to sell my house, my home, out from under me. And they had already paid to put me in a nursing home. I quietly slipped back out the side door and sat on my garden bench, trying to process what I'd just heard. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that I couldn't even cry. I felt numb. Later that evening, after they had gone, I searched Thomas's coat that he had left hanging in the front closet. In the inside pocket, I found more brochures for Pine Meadows Care Center and a partially completed admission form with my name on it. The admission date was set for 2 weeks later. The next morning, I called my neighbor Barbara, who I'd been friends with for decades. "Barbara, has Thomas talked to you about me recently?" I asked cautiously. There was an awkward pause before she replied. "He mentioned you were having some memory problems, Rebecca. He seemed very concerned. Asked me to keep an eye on you and call him if I noticed anything unusual." "What kind of unusual things?" I pressed. "Well, he said you sometimes get confused about where you are or forget to eat. Said you almost burned the house down recently by leaving the stove on." All lies. Complete fabrications. I thanked her and hung up, then started calling other neighbors and friends. Thomas had been spreading the same stories to everyone in my social circle, painting a picture of a declining, incompetent old woman who couldn't take care of herself. The final shock came when I found a pill bottle in my kitchen that wasn't mine. It was tucked behind the coffee canister. A prescription for lorazepam, a strong sedative. I hadn't put it there. The horrible realization dawned on me: Thomas or Stephanie had been slipping medication into my food or drinks during their visits, probably to make me appear confused and forgetful. That explained why I'd been feeling so unusually tired after their recent Sunday dinners at my home. They were drugging me to build their case that I needed to be in a nursing home. The full extent of their plot became crystal clear. They wanted my house, my car, my possessions, everything James and I had worked our entire lives to build. And they were willing to drug me and lock me away to get it. I was terrified, angry, and heartbroken all at once. But beneath all those emotions, something else stirred determination. They had underestimated me. They thought I was a helpless old woman who would be easy to manipulate and discard. They were about to learn how wrong they were. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was enjoying my coffee on the back porch, planning my day. I needed to pick up a prescription and then meet Marion for lunch. The sound of a large vehicle pulling up caught my attention. Looking around the side of the house, I saw a moving van in my driveway. Thomas's SUV pulled in behind it. My heart started racing as Thomas, Stephanie, and two burly men in uniforms approached my door. I met them there before they could knock. "Mom, good news," Thomas said with a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We've arranged a little vacation for you. A nice place where you can relax and be taken care of while we spruce up the house a bit." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, blocking the doorway. "Just a short stay, Mom," he said soothingly. "Remember how we talked about giving the house a fresh coat of paint and fixing that leaky bathroom faucet? These gentlemen are going to help pack some of your things for your little getaway." I looked at the men who shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension. One held a clipboard with Pine Meadows Care Center letterhead visible at the top. "I never agreed to this, Thomas," I said firmly. "You need to leave now." Thomas's expression hardened. "Mom, we've been over this. You're getting forgetful. Remember how you got lost driving to the grocery store last week?" Another lie. I hadn't gotten lost anywhere. Stephanie stepped forward with a small overnight bag. "I've packed your essentials, Rebecca. Toiletries, some comfortable clothes, your medications. Everything else can be brought later." "I'm not going anywhere," I insisted, my voice rising. "This is my house, and I want all of you to leave." Thomas sighed dramatically, then turned to the men. "You see what we're dealing with. The doctor said this might happen." To me, he said, "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's just for a little while, I promise." He took my arm firmly, and before I realized what was happening, I was being guided to his car. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Mom, stop making a scene. The neighbors will see." "Good. Let them see. Help," I called out. But Barbara's house next door was empty. She was visiting her daughter in Oregon. Thomas lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "Mom, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to tell the facility you need to be in the lockdown unit for your own safety. Is that what you want?" The threat silenced me momentarily. I knew enough about nursing homes to understand what that meant: being confined to a secure ward, possibly sedated with minimal freedom. In my shock and fear, I allowed myself to be placed in the car. As we drove away, I looked back at my beloved home, watching it recede in the distance. The moving men were already carrying boxes inside. My garden would wither without me to tend it. The roses I'd just pruned would bloom for strangers. 40 minutes later, we pulled up to Pine Meadows Care Center, a sprawling one-story building with institutional beige siding. The sign proclaimed it a place where seniors thrive. But the barred windows on one wing told a different story. Inside, the smell hit me immediately. A mixture of industrial cleaner cafeteria food and something medicinal. The fluorescent lighting cast a harsh glow over the sparse lobby. A few elderly residents sat in wheelchairs staring vacantly at a muted television. At the reception desk, Thomas signed multiple forms while I stood by ignored. When I tried to interject to say I was there against my will, Stephanie smoothly cut me off. "She gets confused sometimes," she told the intake coordinator with a sad smile. "The dementia is still in the early stages, but her doctor felt she needed full-time supervision now." The coordinator nodded sympathetically, never bothering to address me directly or ask for my consent. I was suddenly invisible, my agency stripped away by my son's lies. A nurse named Brenda led us down a long hallway to room 117, which would apparently be my new home. It was small, with two narrow beds separated by a curtain. One side was clearly occupied with family photos taped to the wall and a worn Afghan on the bed. "You'll be sharing with Gladys," Brenda informed me. "She's been here 3 years. Very quiet, no trouble." My side of the room was bare. Just a metal-framed bed with a thin mattress, a small bedside table, and a compact dresser. The window looked out onto an empty courtyard with a few plastic chairs. "We'll bring the rest of your things tomorrow, Mom," Thomas said, placing my overnight bag on the bed. "You get settled in and we'll be back soon." "Thomas, please don't do this," I pleaded, finally finding my voice again. "I want to go home. This is all a mistake." He patted my hand condescendingly. "It's for the best, Mom. You'll see. The staff will take good care of you." Stephanie barely looked at me, already edging toward the door. "We need to get going, Thomas. We have that appointment, remember?" With a quick, impersonal hug, Thomas handed me my purse, emptied of my house keys and credit cards I would later discover, and walked out with Stephanie. "Dinner's at 5 in the main dining room," Brenda informed me before following them out, leaving me alone in the sterile, unfamiliar room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my world collapsing around me. This couldn't be happening. But it was. My son had abandoned me in a nursing home I didn't need without my consent to take my house and possessions. As the reality of my situation sank in, I finally allowed myself to cry, muffling my sobs with a pillow so as not to disturb my unknown roommate, who would be returning soon. I waited for Thomas to come back the next day with more of my belongings as promised. He didn't come. Or the day after that. When I tried calling him from the community phone in the hallway, the calls went straight to voicemail. It was 5 days before he finally returned without Stephanie, carrying only a small box of photos and a few more clothes. "Where have you been?" I demanded. "You said you'd be back the next day." "Sorry, Mom. Been busy getting things organized at the house." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "How are you settling in?" "I hate it here, Thomas. I want to go home." "This is your home now, Mom," he said firmly. "The doctors agree this is the best place for you. They have activities, medical care, everything you need." "I don't need any of this. I was fine in my own home. Please, Thomas." He ignored my pleas instead, pulling out a folder of papers. "I need you to sign these, Mom. Just some formalities to make sure your care is covered." I refused to sign anything without reading it first, which clearly annoyed him. When I started carefully reviewing the documents, he became impatient. "Mom, it's just routine paperwork. Sign here and here," he said, pointing to signature lines. I recognized what I was looking at. Power of attorney forms that would give Thomas complete control over all my financial and medical decisions. I set the papers aside. "I'm not signing these, Thomas. Not until I talk to my own lawyer." His face darkened. "Don't be difficult, Mom. This is all for your own good." When I remained firm, he gathered the papers and left, promising to return soon with clearer explanations of what I needed to sign. Over the next few weeks, a grim routine established itself. The days at Pine Meadows blended together in a monotonous parade of bland meals, patronizing staff, and structured activities I had no interest in. My roommate Gladys turned out to be a blessing in disguise, a former librarian with a sharp mind trapped in a failing body. She quickly realized I didn't belong there. "They did the same to me," she confided one night. "My daughter and her husband wanted my condo on Lake Michigan. Been fighting to get out for 3 years, but once you're in the system—" She trailed off with a resigned shrug. Thomas visited sporadically, always with papers for me to sign and excuses about why I couldn't come home yet. Each time I asked about my house, my car, my possessions, each time his answers grew vaguer. Then came the day I saw Stephanie driving my silver Camry past the nursing home window. She didn't even look toward the building as she cruised by in my car, her sunglasses perched on her nose, the window down, her hair blowing in the breeze of a freedom that had been stolen from me. That night, as I lay in the uncomfortable bed, listening to Gladys's labored breathing, I felt something inside me break. The sadness and shock that had enveloped me since my arrival transformed into something else, pure, focused anger. And with that anger came clarity. I would not spend the rest of my days in this place. I would not let Thomas and Stephanie steal my life. The next morning, I approached the nurses' station with a new determination. "I'd like to speak to a social worker, please," I requested politely but firmly. "It's about my rights as a resident." A week after requesting to see a social worker, Denise Taylor finally came to meet me. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her mid-30s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, and a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately appreciated. "Mrs. Anderson, I understand you have some concerns about your placement here." She began, sitting across from me in a small consultation room, away from prying ears. "I'm here against my will," I stated plainly. "My son brought me here under false pretenses, claiming I need care that I don't need. I want to go home." Denise didn't look surprised. She'd probably heard similar stories before. "Tell me more about what happened." She encouraged taking notes as I recounted the entire sequence of events, from the twisted ankle to overhearing Thomas and Stephanie planning to sell my house. "Have you been evaluated by our medical team since arriving?" she asked. "Yes, but I'm not sure the doctor really listened to me." She kept referring to notes my son had provided about my supposed memory problems. Denise frowned. "You have rights as a resident, Mrs. Anderson. Federal law protects nursing home residents from involuntary confinement if they're mentally competent to make their own decisions." She explained the Nursing Home Reform Act to me, detailing my rights to make my own healthcare decisions, manage my own finances, and choose where I live. She even provided me with a printed pamphlet outlining these protections. "What can I do now?" I asked, clutching the pamphlet like a lifeline. "First, I'd recommend a full cognitive assessment with our independent psychologist, Dr. Bennett. He's not affiliated with the admitting physicians. If he finds you're competent, and from our conversation I have no reason to doubt that, you have the legal right to discharge yourself." Hope fluttered in my chest for the first time in weeks. And then what my son may have already sold my house. "That's where things get complicated," Denise admitted. "If your name is on the deed and you never signed it over, he legally can't sell it without your consent. But we should check on that. Do you have anyone outside who could help, a friend, a relative, maybe an attorney?" I thought of my neighbor Barbara. Despite believing Thomas's lies, she had been my friend for decades. I decided to call her from Denise's office. Barbara was shocked to hear the truth. "Rebecca, I had no idea. Thomas told everyone you had agreed to move into assisted living because you were having serious memory episodes. He said you were actually relieved to have the burden of the house taken off your shoulders." "None of that is true, Barbara. Can you check on my house, see what's happening there?" She promised to drive by that very day and call me back. When she did, her news confirmed my fears. "There's a real estate agent sign in the yard, Rebecca. It says 'coming soon.' And there's been a dumpster in the driveway. I've seen people carrying things out." My heart sank, but my resolve strengthened. "Barbara, in my home office, there's a fireproof box in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The combination is James's birthday. Inside are all my important documents. The deed to the house, my will, insurance policies, everything. Can you possibly get it for me?" Barbara, bless her heart, didn't hesitate. "I still have the spare key you gave me years ago. I'll go right now." The next day, Barbara visited me, smuggling in my document box. Hugging her felt like embracing freedom itself. As soon as she left, Denise helped me review the contents. The deed to the house was indeed solely in my name. Thomas had no legal right to sell it without my signature. My car title was there too, along with my original will that left everything equally to Thomas, and several charities James and I had supported throughout our lives. "We need to get you legal representation immediately," Denise advised. "I know an elder law attorney who works with residents here. Would you like me to contact her?" Within days, I was sitting across from Patricia Goldman, a sharp-witted attorney in her 60s who specialized in elder abuse cases. "What your son is attempting is illegal on multiple fronts," Patricia informed me after hearing my story. "Involuntary confinement, financial exploitation, possible medication tampering, attempted property theft. We have grounds for immediate action." Dr. Bennett's cognitive assessment came back just as I expected. I was fully competent to make all my own decisions. Armed with this documentation and Patricia's legal expertise, we developed a strategic plan. First, Patricia filed emergency motions to block any sale of my property and to freeze all my accounts that Thomas had access to. Then she helped me draft a new power of attorney, naming her as my representative and explicitly revoking any authority Thomas might claim. Denise, meanwhile, had been quietly gathering allies among the nursing staff who had noticed I was different from the typical resident. Many had observed my clear cognitive abilities and independence. One nurse, Louisa, confided that she had been suspicious of my admission from the beginning. "You came in walking on your own, having complete conversations, managing all your own care," Louisa told me. "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know when someone needs to be here and when they don't." With medical evidence of my competence, legal protections in place, and staff support, we were ready to confront Pine Meadows administration. Patricia arranged a meeting with the facility director, the head nurse, and the admitting physician. Patricia laid out the facts, methodically presenting Dr. Bennett's assessment and pointing out the legal liabilities the facility faced for holding a competent adult against their will. Mrs. Anderson has the right to discharge herself immediately, Patricia concluded. Furthermore, we have reason to believe her admission was fraudulently arranged by her son for financial gain. The facility director, clearly concerned about legal implications, quickly agreed that I could leave. The admitting physician attempted to defend her diagnosis, but wilted under Patricia's questioning about why she had relied so heavily on a family member's claims without thoroughly evaluating me herself. As the meeting concluded, I felt a weight lifting. I was going to be free. But free to go where? If my house was in the process of being sold, where would I live? Patricia addressed this before I even asked. I've arranged for you to stay temporarily with a client of mine who runs a small licensed adult family home. It's comfortable, private, and most importantly, completely voluntary. From there, we can work on reclaiming your property and holding your son accountable. 2 days later, with my few belongings packed and goodbyes said to Gladys and the staff who had supported me, I walked out of Pine Meadows, under my own power, my head held high. As Patricia drove me to my temporary housing, I gazed out the window at the world I had been cut off from. Trees were beginning to show their fall colors. People were going about their normal lives. Freedom felt sweet, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Thomas had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. He had tried to steal not just my property, but my autonomy, my dignity, my very life. The hurt was immeasurable, but I pushed it aside. There would be time for grief later. Right now, I needed to focus on one thing, taking back what was mine, and ensuring Thomas and Stephanie couldn't do this to me, or anyone else, ever again. From the safety of Elaine's adult family home, a comfortable converted ranch house with just 4 residents, I began the process of reclaiming my life. Elaine was a retired nurse who had opened her home to seniors who needed minimal assistance in a family-like setting. Unlike Pine Meadows, there were no institutional routines or restrictive rules. I had my own room, could come and go as I pleased, and was treated like a capable adult. Patricia wasted no time in implementing our legal strategy. First, she arranged for me to open new bank accounts at a different bank from where Thomas and I had our joint account. My Social Security and pension payments were redirected to these new accounts. Next, she filed an elder abuse complaint with Adult Protective Services, documenting Thomas and Stephanie's actions. The APS investigator was thorough, interviewing me multiple times and gathering evidence from Denise, Dr. Bennett, and the nursing home staff who had supported me. When it came time to confront Thomas, Patricia suggested we do it at her office rather than letting him know where I was staying. She called him, simply stating that there were urgent legal matters concerning your mother that require immediate attention. Thomas arrived at the appointed time, his confident swagger faltering when he saw me sitting beside Patricia. He had clearly expected to meet the attorney alone. "Mom, what are you doing here? You should be at Pine Meadows. It's not safe for you to be out." His immediate attempt to reassert the narrative of my incompetence was telling. "Thomas, please sit down," Patricia directed coolly. "We have serious matters to discuss." As Thomas took a seat, Patricia laid out the facts. I had been medically evaluated and found completely competent. Legal motions had been filed to prevent any sale of my property, and an investigation into elder abuse was underway. Thomas's face cycled through shock, anger, and then calculation. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "I was only trying to protect my mother. She had a fall. She was forgetting things. Ask anyone." "We have Mr. Anderson," Patricia replied. "And we found a disturbing pattern of misinformation that you spread about your mother's condition. We also have evidence that you may have tampered with her food or drinks to make her appear confused." His face paled at that. He hadn't expected me to discover the medication. "That's absurd," he stammered. "Mom, you know I would never do anything to hurt you. Everything I did was out of love and concern." I looked at my son, this person I had raised, nurtured, and loved unconditionally, and felt a profound sadness. If that were true, Thomas, you would have talked to me honestly. You would have respected my wishes. Instead, you lied to me, to my friends, even to medical professionals. You tried to take my home, my car, everything I've worked for my entire life. It wasn't like that, he insisted, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. Then what was it like? I challenged. Explain to me why you told the nursing home I had dementia when I don't. Explain why you were selling my house without my permission. Explain why Stephanie is driving my car. He had no answers, only more excuses and denials. Patricia interjected, Mr. Anderson, here are your options. You can cooperate fully, return all property belonging to your mother, provide a full accounting of any money taken from her accounts, and cease all attempts to control her assets. If you do this promptly, Mrs. Anderson may consider not pursuing criminal charges. Criminal charges? Thomas looked genuinely shocked. For taking care of my mother. For elder abuse, fraud, theft, and attempted financial exploitation, Patricia corrected. All with substantial documentation. The meeting ended with Thomas sullenly agreeing to Patricia's terms, though I doubted his sincerity. As we expected, instead of complying, he went straight to the house, my house, where Stephanie was overseeing the packing of my belongings. Barbara called me immediately. Rebecca, Thomas, and Stephanie just stormed into the house. They're taking things out and loading them into their SUV. They look furious. Patricia had anticipated this and already had a court order ready to go. Within hours, the local sheriff was at my property, enforcing the order that prevented Thomas and Stephanie from removing anything further or entering the premises without my permission. But significant damage had already been done. When I finally returned to my home a week later, accompanied by Patricia and a locksmith who changed all the locks, I found chaos. Many valuable items were missing. My jewelry, James's watch collection, family silver, and smaller antiques. The house had been partially emptied with packing boxes everywhere. Some of my furniture was gone, presumably sold or moved to Thomas's house. The garden I had tended so lovingly was withered from neglect. My beautiful roses had died without water in the autumn heat. Standing in the wreckage of my home, I made a difficult decision. This house, despite all the memories it held, was now tainted by betrayal. Every room would remind me of what Thomas had tried to do. And practically speaking, maintaining it alone was becoming a challenge as I aged. But if I was going to leave, it would be on my terms, not through my son's deceit. I called a realtor I knew personally, not the one Thomas had hired, and asked her to assess the property's true market value. As I suspected, it was worth substantially more than what Thomas had planned to list it for. In the current seller's market, with inventory low and demand high, my well-maintained home in an established neighborhood could command top dollar. We can list it for $725,000, my realtor friend Margaret advised. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got multiple offers above asking. With Patricia's help, I created a comprehensive inventory of everything missing from my home and filed a police report for the stolen items. The detective assigned to the case took it seriously, especially with the ongoing APS investigation backing up my claims. Meanwhile, I began looking for a new place to live, somewhere that would be mine, that would represent this new chapter in my life. I found it in a lovely 2-bedroom condominium in a secure building designed for active seniors. It had an elevator, no stairs, to navigate a community garden I could contribute to, and best of all, a balcony with southern exposure, perfect for container gardening. The building had a clubhouse, swimming pool, and organized activities without any of the restrictive oversight of a nursing home. The price was reasonable, $450,000, which would leave me with a substantial nest egg from the sale of my house, even after purchasing the condo outright. As expected, my house received multiple offers within days of listing. I accepted one for $750,000 with a 60-day escrow that gave me time to properly pack and organize my remaining belongings. I decided to buy a new car too. Nothing fancy, but newer than my old Camry. The police had located my car at Thomas and Stephanie's house, but recovering it would take time with the legal proceedings. Rather than wait, I used some of my savings to purchase a practical Honda Civic that would meet my needs. Throughout this process, Thomas made several attempts to contact me, alternating between apologetic pleas and thinly veiled threats about contesting my competency. Patricia fielded all his calls, maintaining a professional buffer between us. Stephanie was less subtle. She showed up at Elaine's home one day, having somehow tracked me down. Her approach was pure intimidation. "You're making a huge mistake, Rebecca," she hissed when Elaine allowed her a brief supervised visit after checking with me. "Thomas is devastated. You're destroying your relationship with your only son over a misunderstanding. Is that really what you want for your final years? To be alone?" I looked at this woman who had helped plot to strip me of my dignity and freedom, and felt remarkably calm. "I'm not alone, Stephanie. I have friends who truly care about me. What I don't need are family members who see me as nothing but a collection of assets to be acquired." Her mask of concern slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "You ungrateful old woman. After all Thomas has done for you, you'll regret this." Elaine showed her out promptly, and we filed a report about the threatening behavior with APS to add to our documentation. As the sale of my house progressed and my new condo purchase was finalized, I had one more important task: revising my will. Working with Patricia, I created a new estate plan that reflected my current wishes and protected my assets from Thomas's claims. The bulk of my estate would now be divided between several charities James and I had always supported, with educational trusts established for Amanda and Jason that Thomas and Stephanie couldn't access. I also set aside funds for Barbara and a few other loyal friends who had stood by me. Thomas would receive a small inheritance, enough to show I hadn't completely disinherited my only child, which might give him grounds to contest the will, but not the windfall he and Stephanie had clearly been counting on. The day I moved into my new condo was one of mixed emotions. There was sadness at leaving the home where James and I had built our life together, but also a powerful sense of reclaiming my independence. Each item I unpacked in my new space represented a conscious choice about what to bring forward into this next chapter. Patricia had arranged for the movers, making sure Thomas and Stephanie couldn't interfere. As the last box was brought in and the movers left, I stood in my new living room surveying the space that was entirely mine. The afternoon sun streamed through the balcony doors, illuminating the fresh start I had created for myself. On the balcony, I had already placed pots ready for spring planting. My new life was just beginning. The confrontation I had been both dreading and preparing for was inevitable. It came 3 days after I had moved in, when Thomas discovered through the public record that my house had been sold. He arrived at my condo, unannounced, anger barely contained beneath a thin veneer of concern. Thomas pounded on my door at 7:30 in the evening. I checked the peephole before opening it instantly, recognizing my son's tense posture. "Mom, what have you done?" he demanded, pushing past me into my new living room without waiting for an invitation. He looked around incredulously at the well-appointed condo. "You sold the house without even telling me." "Hello to you too, Thomas," I replied calmly, closing the door. I had prepared for this moment and was determined to maintain my composure. "This is insane. You can't just make decisions like this. You need supervision, guidance." "What I needed was honesty from my son," I interrupted. "What I needed was respect for my autonomy. What I got instead was betrayal." His face flushed. "I was trying to help you. Everything I did was for your own good." "Was it for my own good when you lied to my friends about my mental state? When you tried to sell my house behind my back? When you put me in a nursing home under false pretenses? Or perhaps it was for my own good when you were drugging my tea to make me seem confused?" Thomas had the decency to look shocked at the last accusation. "I never—" "Save it, Thomas. I found the medication in my kitchen. Pills that weren't prescribed to me, hidden behind the coffee canister after you and Stephanie visited." He switched tactics. "Mom, you're listening to these lawyers who are just taking your money. They've convinced you of things that aren't true. I'm your son. I love you. If this is how you show love, I'd hate to see how you treat people you dislike." I said, my voice steady, despite the pain in my heart. Thomas paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "So what now? You've sold the family home. Where's the money going? What's happening with your will?" His priorities were crystal clear. "My finances are no longer your concern," I informed him. "I have trusted advisors managing my affairs." "I'm your son," he exploded. "Of course it's my concern. That house was my inheritance, my birthright." And there it was, the raw truth I had suspected all along. In Thomas's mind, my possessions were already his, my only value the assets I would leave behind. "The house was mine, Thomas, mine and your father's. We worked our entire lives to pay for it. It was never your birthright." "You're being manipulated," he insisted. "These people, this lawyer, that social worker, they're taking advantage of you." I almost laughed at the irony. "No, Thomas. The only person who tried to take advantage of me was you. And Stephanie, of course. How is she enjoying my car, by the way? The one you took without permission?" His expression confirmed my suspicion that they still had my Camry despite the police report. "That's different. We were just keeping it safe while you were away." "You mean while I was imprisoned in a nursing home through your lies?" I shook my head sadly. "The police will be recovering the car soon. I've already replaced it, but the principle matters." Thomas's demeanor suddenly shifted. The anger gave way to calculation, then to a poor attempt at contrition. "Mom, I see now that there have been misunderstandings. I never intended for you to feel betrayed or hurt. Perhaps I was overzealous in my concern, but it came from a place of love." This abrupt pivot to apologetic son was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Did he really think I would fall for it? "I appreciate that you see things differently now," I replied neutrally. "Actions have consequences, Thomas. Trust once broken isn't easily repaired." He leaned forward earnestly. "But it can be repaired, right? We're family. Nothing's more important than family." "Families should support each other, not exploit each other," I pointed out. "Families should listen, not dictate. Families should respect boundaries, not violate them." "I've learned my lesson, Mom. I swear. Things will be different now." His eyes darted around the condo, likely calculating its value. "This is a nice place. Smaller but nice. I could help you get settled, visit more often. Bring the kids." "I would like to see Amanda and Jason," I admitted. My grandchildren were innocent in all this. But on my terms, not as part of some scheme to regain control of my assets. Thomas flinched at my directness. "That's not what this is about." "Isn't it? Then why is your first concern where the money from the house went? Why not ask about my health, my happiness, how I'm adapting to my new home?" He had no answer for that. "I think you should leave now, Thomas. I'm tired. It's been a long day." I stood, indicating the conversation was over. "We're not finished discussing this," he insisted, remaining seated. "Yes, we are, at least for today. This is my home, and I'm asking you to leave." My voice was firm. Something in my tone must have convinced him I meant business. He rose reluctantly. "Fine, but we'll talk again soon. There's a lot to sort out." "Through my attorney," I specified. "Any further discussions about financial matters or legal issues will go through Patricia." His jaw tightened at the mention of my lawyer. "You don't need a lawyer to talk to your own son." "Recent events suggest otherwise," I countered. As I showed him to the door, he made one last attempt. "Mom, please think about what you're doing. The family legacy, everything Dad worked for. You're just giving it away." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Your father worked to provide for our family, to create a home where we could be happy and secure. He never saw our possessions as more important than our relationships. I wonder when you lost sight of that." After Thomas left, I sat in my new living room, letting the emotions wash over me. There was sadness for the relationship that might never be repaired, anger at the betrayal, but also pride in my own strength. I had stood my ground. I had advocated for myself when no one else would. The next morning, I received a call from Patricia. "Rebecca, I've just had a very interesting conversation with Stephanie." Apparently, after leaving my condo, Thomas had gone home and told Stephanie about the house sale and my new living arrangement. She had completely lost her composure, berating Thomas for letting me get away and losing their inheritance. The argument had escalated until neighbors called the police about a domestic disturbance. In her fury, Stephanie had made a critical mistake. She had called Patricia's office and left a voicemail full of threats and admissions. "You think you're so clever turning Rebecca against us?" she had ranted. "We had everything planned perfectly. The house, the car, everything was going to be ours. You've ruined it all, and I won't forget that." Patricia was delighted. "This voicemail is a gift, Rebecca. It's explicit acknowledgement of their intentions. It strengthens our case immeasurably." The legal proceedings continued over the next several months. The police recovered my car from Thomas and Stephanie's home, though they claimed I had gifted it to them, a claim easily disproven since the title remained in my name and there was no documentation of any transfer. Many of my missing belongings were also found in their possession. When confronted with evidence and the threat of criminal charges, they returned most items, though some, including James's watches and my mother's jewelry, had already been sold. The Adult Protective Services investigation concluded with a finding that Thomas and Stephanie had indeed engaged in elder abuse and financial exploitation. This finding was forwarded to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. Thomas and Stephanie hired their own attorney and tried to counter with claims that I was incompetent, despite all medical evidence to the contrary. They even attempted to have me subjected to additional psychological evaluations, a move the court quickly rejected, given the existing thorough assessments. Their legal maneuvering became increasingly desperate as they realized the seriousness of their situation. Thomas tried to claim he had acted out of genuine concern, while Stephanie maintained she had minimal involvement, a position contradicted by multiple witnesses and her own damning voicemail. Throughout this difficult process, I found unexpected strength in my new community. My neighbors at the condo complex were supportive, offering friendship without judgment. I joined a book club and a container gardening group, rebuilding a social circle independent of the connections Thomas had poisoned with his lies. I also reached out directly to Amanda and Jason, sending them letters explaining that regardless of the conflict with their parents, I still loved them and wanted to maintain a relationship. Amanda never responded, but Jason visited me once awkwardly, but sincerely saying he didn't understand everything that had happened, but knew it wasn't right how his parents had treated me. That single visit gave me hope that at least one family bond might be preserved. The legal case eventually settled before going to trial. Thomas and Stephanie agreed to financial restitution for the items they had sold, plus additional damages. More importantly, they signed legally binding agreements never to attempt to control my finances or living arrangements again. The nursing home also reached a settlement with me after Patricia presented evidence that they had admitted me without proper evaluation or consent. The settlement included a policy change requiring more thorough assessment of incoming residents' cognitive capacity and explicit written consent from the individuals themselves, not just family members. As for my assets, they remained securely under my control. The proceeds from my house sale, minus the purchase price of my condo, were invested conservatively to supplement my retirement income. I lived comfortably but modestly, finding joy in simple pleasures, like my container garden on the balcony, where I had successfully transplanted cuttings from some of my original roses. The new will remained in place, with the bulk of my estate designated for charities and educational trusts for my grandchildren. Thomas would receive a small inheritance, a reminder that while his actions had consequences, he was still my son, and some part of me still held hope for redemption. 1 year after moving into my condo, I hosted a small gathering of the friends who had supported me through the ordeal: Barbara, Denise, Patricia, and a few new neighbors. As we shared a meal and conversation, I realized I had created something precious, a chosen family based on mutual respect and genuine caring. To new beginnings, I toasted, raising my glass, and to remembering that our worth isn't measured by what we own, but by how we treat each other. Later, alone on my balcony watching the sunset, I thought about the journey I'd been forced to take. The betrayal by Thomas had been devastating, but it had also revealed my own resilience. At 73, I had fought for my freedom and won. I had refused to be discarded or controlled. My story wasn't over. This was just a new chapter, one I was writing on my own terms. And despite everything, it was shaping up to be a good one. The journey from betrayal to reclaiming my life was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. In the beginning, the pain of Thomas and Stephanie's betrayal consumed me. How could my own son, the little boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice, treat me like a burden to be discarded? The question haunted my sleepless nights in those early days at Pine Meadows. When I first realized what they had done, placing me in a nursing home under false pretenses to take my house and car, I felt a kind of brokenness I hadn't experienced since James died. It was as if the foundation of my world had crumbled beneath me. But humans are remarkably resilient creatures. As poet Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "We are all broken, that's how the light gets in." And slowly, painfully, light began to filter through the cracks in my broken heart. The healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small moments. The first time I stood up to Thomas in Patricia's office and saw the surprise in his eyes, the day I walked out of Pine Meadows on my own terms, the morning I woke up in my new condo and felt for the first time that this space was truly mine. My friends were instrumental in my recovery. Barbara, who had been deceived by Thomas's lies, but immediately rallied to help me once she knew the truth. Denise, who saw my situation clearly and connected me with the resources I needed. Patricia, whose legal expertise was matched only by her compassion. Even my roommate Gladys, whose bitter experience paralleled my own and helped me feel less alone. Through their support, I learned that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who stands by you when the path grows dark. The legal proceedings against Thomas and Stephanie were necessary, but painful. I took no joy in seeing my son's reputation damaged or in the financial penalties they faced. But I did feel a profound sense of justice when the nursing home agreed to change their admission policies, potentially protecting other seniors from experiencing what I had endured. My relationship with Thomas remains complicated. The trust between us has been severely damaged, perhaps irreparably. I've set clear boundaries. Our communication happens primarily through attorneys, and I've made it explicit that I will never again allow him to make decisions about my care or finances. Yet a mother's love doesn't simply vanish, even in the face of profound betrayal. I still have moments when I remember Thomas as the little boy who would bring me dandelions from the yard, or the teenager who saved up to buy me a birthstone necklace for Mother's Day. Those memories coexist uncomfortably with the grown man who saw me as an obstacle to his inheritance. My new life has brought unexpected joys. My container garden on the balcony has flourished with miniature roses, herbs, and seasonal flowers, bringing color and life to my space. I've developed friendships with neighbors who accept me as I am, without the burden of past expectations or judgments. I've even found purpose in my experience volunteering with a local elder rights organization that educates seniors about their legal protections. Sharing my story has helped others recognize warning signs of elder exploitation and understand they're not alone if it happens to them. The most important lesson I've learned through all of this is that age doesn't diminish our right to autonomy and dignity. Society often views seniors as diminished versions of our younger selves, assuming that gray hair and wrinkles signal a corresponding decline in our capacity to make decisions. My experience taught me to advocate fiercely for myself, to question those who claim to know what's best for me without consulting me, and to recognize that my years of life experience are an asset, not a liability. I'm not angry anymore, at least not most days. Anger is a heavy burden to carry, and I've set it down in favor of something more productive: wisdom to share with others, and peace within myself. If there's one thing I could tell anyone facing a similar situation, it's this: you are worth fighting for. Your voice matters. Your choices count. No one, not even family, has the right to take those away from you. Life has a way of surprising us even in our 8th decade. I never expected to start over at 73 to build a new home and a new community. I certainly never expected to stand against my only child in court. But I've discovered a strength in myself that I didn't know existed, and that knowledge can never be taken away. As I tend to my balcony garden, watching new growth emerge from tiny seeds, I'm reminded that it's never too late for renewal. The roses I transplanted from my old garden, cuttings I took before leaving that beloved space forever, have taken root in their new containers. They're smaller than they were in the spacious garden beds of my former home, but their blooms are just as vibrant, their fragrance just as sweet. Like those roses I've been transplanted. The space around me has changed, but my essential self remains intact. In fact, I think I'm blooming more vibrantly than ever in this new chapter of my life. What's your experience with family members who tried to control your life? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against loved ones? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and write a new chapter in your story.